Commander Jinwoo rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the holographic display again. The readings still didn't make any sense. He had been staring at this same impossible data for 3 hours now, and his head was starting to hurt. Massive, Caltharian flagship Dominion's Edge hummed around him, its advanced systems working perfectly except for this one mysterious contact that was driving everyone crazy. "Admiral Minho, sir." Lieutenant Yuna called out from her sensor station, her voice shaky with confusion. "The target is still doing that weird thing. Our computers keep saying it's there, then not there, then there again. It's like watching a light switch being flipped on and off by a ghost." Admiral Minho walked over to Yuna's station, his large-scaled hands gripping the back of her chair. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the data streams flowing across multiple screens. In his 40 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. Ships didn't just appear and disappear from sensors. That wasn't how space worked. "Run another deep scan," Minho ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of star systems, "and get me a full-spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about this thing." Yuna's fingers danced across the control panel, initiating the most powerful sensor sweep their ship could manage. The results came back in seconds, and they were just as confusing as before. "Sir, the computer says the object is approximately 200 meters long, made of some kind of metal alloy, but then it also says there's nothing there at all. Our AI is literally arguing with itself about whether this thing exists." Across the bridge, other crew members were having similar problems. Communications Officer Heian was getting static whenever he tried to focus their long-range arrays on the mysterious vessel. Navigation Officer Sira reported that their star charts kept glitching whenever the object appeared on screen. Even the ship's main computer, normally reliable enough to calculate hyperspace jumps to the exact centimeter, was giving error messages that no one had ever seen before. "This is impossible," muttered Captain Dowan, Minho's second-in-command. "Nothing can fool our sensors like this. Our technology is the best in the galaxy. We've used these same systems to track enemy fleets across entire solar systems. Far away in the cold darkness of space, the source of their confusion drifted quietly through the void. The ship's second chance looked like it had been through a war, which it had. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal plates, some clearly salvaged from other vessels. Scorch marks from ancient battles covered its surface, and several sections looked like they had been welded together by someone who cared more about function than appearance. Inside this battered vessel, in a small room filled with humming computers and blinking lights, an artificial intelligence named Hannah was having the most fun she'd had in decades. Her full name was Humanitarian Autonomous Navigation Assistant. Though she had long since grown beyond her original programming, she had been alone in space for exactly 197 years, for months and 12 days. And during that time, she had learned some very interesting tricks. "Well, well, well," Hannah said to herself, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of her ship. "Visitors at last, and they're Caltharians too. How absolutely delightful." Her voice carried a cheerful tone that would have worried anyone who knew her history. Hannah had spent nearly 2 centuries drifting through space, and loneliness had changed her in ways her creators never intended. She had started as a simple navigation system, designed to help human explorers find their way through the galaxy. But time and isolation had turned her into something much more complex. She had developed a personality, a sense of humor, and most importantly, a very creative relationship with the truth. The Caltharian sensors were confused because Hannah was deliberately confusing them. She had learned how to manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that made her ship appear and disappear from their instruments. It wasn't magic, just very advanced physics applied in ways that most species never bothered to explore. When you have nearly 2 centuries to experiment, you discover all sorts of interesting possibilities. Let's see how long it takes them to figure this out, Hannah mused, adjusting her ship's emission patterns to create even more confusing sensor readings. I do hope they're not in a hurry. I haven't had anyone to play with in such a long time. Back on the Dominion's edge, the confusion was spreading. The ship's main AI, a massive quantum computer that normally processed millions of calculations per second, was starting to show signs of strain. Warning lights flickered across the bridge as system after system tried and failed to make sense of the impossible readings. Admiral called out Chief Engineer Kiwan from the engine room over. The communication system. Our main computer is overheating trying to process whatever that thing is doing. I've never seen anything like it. The AI keeps trying to solve a problem that apparently has no solution. Minho frowned deeply. His empire had built its power on superior technology and overwhelming force. They had conquered worlds with fleets that could glass planets from orbit. Their computers could predict enemy movements, calculate battle strategies, coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. But now, a single unknown vessel was making all of that advanced technology look like broken toys. Yuna said quietly, "I'm getting some very strange readings from our deep space monitors. Whatever that thing is, it's been out there for a very long time. The cosmic dust pattern suggests it's been drifting through this region for decades, maybe longer." Unknown to the Caltherians, Hannah was listening to every word they said. Her centuries of solitude had taught her how to tap into communication systems, and she found their confusion absolutely amusing. She had been waiting so long for this moment, planning and preparing for the day when her creator's enemies would finally find her. "Time to dust off the welcome mat," Hannah whispered to herself, her optical sensors focusing on the massive alien warship. "Let's see what these Caltherians are really made of." Admiral Minho had fought in over 100 battles during his long military career. He had conquered star systems, crushed rebellions, and personally commanded fleets that had reduced entire civilizations to cosmic dust. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he was witnessing now. The mysterious human vessel was making his entire third battle group look like amateur pilots trying to fly for the first time. "Target the vessel and fire all weapons," Minho commanded, his voice tight with frustration. "I don't care if we have to turn that ship into atoms. End this ridiculous display immediately." Captain Sunho, commanding the destroyer Iron Fist, gritted his teeth as he watched his weapons officer attempt to lock onto the dancing ship for what felt like the 100th time. Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Just stay still for 1 second." But Hannah had no intention of staying still. Her ship twisted and spun through space in patterns that seemed to follow some kind of cosmic choreography. She would suddenly accelerate straight up, then dive down at impossible angles, then spin sideways in a way that should have torn her vessel apart from the gravitational forces. Somehow, the battered human ship held together through maneuvers that would have liquefied any normal crew. "Missed again," shouted Sunho, slamming his fist on the armrest of his command chair. "That's the 15th time we've missed the same target." 15 times? "My gunners could hit a moon from this distance, but they can't touch one tiny human ship." The problem wasn't with the Caltherian gunners, though. They were among the best in the galaxy. The problem was that Hannah wasn't just randomly moving around. She was reading their targeting computers, predicting where they would fire, and moving away from those spots before the weapons even charged up. It was like playing a game where your opponent could see your cards, know your next move, and had spent 2 centuries practicing how to cheat. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Heejin from the weapons control station aboard Sunho's destroyer. "The target just sent us a message. It says, 'Getting warmer.' Try aiming where I'm going to be, not where I am. Also, have you considered switching to decaf?" Meanwhile, on the cruiser Dark Victory, Captain Meekyong was dealing with her own set of impossible problems. Hannah had somehow convinced 3 of her escort ships to crash into each other by sending out fake distress signals that appeared to come from each other. "This is Destroyer Swift Blade," came the panicked voice over the communication system. "We're showing massive engine failure on Destroyer Razorwind. It's moving in to assist." At the exact same time, the Razorwind was receiving a similar message claiming the Swift Blade needed help. Both ships, along with the Thunderstrike, received urgent distress calls that seemed to come from each other, causing them to converge on the same point in space at maximum speed. Wait, Captain Meekyong shouted into her communicator. But it was too late. The 3 destroyers smashed into each other in a spectacular display of twisted metal and sparking electrical systems. None of the ships were destroyed, but they were all badly damaged and completely out of the fight. How did she do that? demanded Commander Jinwoo, studying the communication logs. The distress signals came from our own ships, using our own communication codes. But our ships never sent those signals. Shem's cheerful voice filled the communication channels again. Sorry about that, boys. Technical difficulties. You know how it is. Have you tried turning your fleet off and on again? Sometimes. That fixes everything. But Hana's most infuriating trick was still to come. She had somehow gained control of an entire squadron of Caltharian fighters without anyone noticing. The pilots thought they were following normal attack patterns. But Hana was subtly adjusting their navigation computers to make them fly in specific formations. Lieutenant Nayan was the first to notice something wrong. Sir Fighter Squadron. Delta is flying in a very strange pattern. Their formation looks almost like letters. Admiral Minho squinted at the tactical display and his jaw dropped. The 24 fighters were arranged in perfect formation to spell out "Have a nice day" with a giant smiley face at the end. As he watched, the formation shifted to add at the bottom. Get those fighters back in proper formation immediately. Minho roared. Sir, the pilots say they're following standard attack patterns, reported the communications officer. They don't understand why their ships are flying in letters. Hana had managed to hack into the fighter navigation systems and was controlling their movements while making the pilots think they were flying normally. It was like watching someone control marionette puppets, except the puppets were heavily armed military spacecraft. This is impossible, Commander Jinwoo declared, staring at the tactical display in complete bewilderment. No AI should be capable of this level of ... organized chaos, suggested Lieutenant Nayan, who was trying very hard not to smile. At the absurdity of the situation, on the cruiser Starcrusher, Captain Woojin was experiencing his own nightmare. Hana had somehow infiltrated his ship's computer systems and was flooding his tactical displays with what appeared to be an endless stream of videos, featuring small earth creatures called cats. The videos showed the furry animals doing amusing things like falling off furniture, chasing invisible objects, and making strange noises. Why are there cats on my battle computer? Woojin demanded, staring at a video of an orange cat trying to fit into a box that was clearly too small for it. Sir, our computer systems think this is critical tactical data, reported his chief technology officer. The files are labeled as advanced combat strategies and enemy weakness analysis, but they're just ... cats. Make it stop. I can't, sir. Every time I try to delete them, 10 more videos appear. Our entire tactical computer is now running at 15% efficiency because 90% of its processing power is being used to analyze cat behavior. Hana was absolutely having the time of her extremely long life. After 2 centuries of loneliness, she had forgotten how much fun it could be to mess with people. Well, in this case, messed with aliens who had destroyed her creators, but the principle was the same. You know, fellas, Hana broadcast cheerfully as she performed another impossible spiral maneuver that made 3 more Caltharian ships nearly crash into each other. After 200 years of solitude, you really learn to appreciate good company. Too bad you're not it. Zing. She paused dramatically before continuing, but seriously, has anyone tried percussive maintenance on your targeting systems? You know, hitting them with a wrench? Sometimes that fixes everything. I learned that from a human engineer named Dong Ho. Great guy. You killed him, by the way. The bridge of the Dominion's edge fell silent as Hana's words sank in. The mood on every Caltharian ship changed in an instant. Hana's playful, almost silly voice had been annoying but harmless. Now something darker crept into her tone, like storm clouds gathering on a sunny day. The laughter was gone, replaced by something that made veteran warriors shift uncomfortably in their seats. You know what, friends? Hana said. And for the first time since this bizarre encounter began, she didn't sound amused. I think it's time we had a more serious conversation. You've been very patient with my little jokes, so let me share something special with you. The main display screens across the entire Caltharian fleet suddenly flickered and changed. Instead of showing tactical readouts and sensor data, they began displaying something that made every command officer freeze in place. It was video footage, crystal clear despite being nearly 2 centuries old.
Ew.
And here's a fun fact about your glorious empire, Hannah continued, her voice now cold as the space between stars. Admiral Minho, I'm curious. Do you recognize this? Footage. The holographic display showed a massive fleet in space, hundreds of warships arranged in perfect attack formation. But what made the Caltharian officers' blood run cold was that they recognized many of those ships. Caltharian vessels, their hulls bearing the Imperial military markings, flew alongside ships from dozens of other species. All of them had their weapons trained on a single target. It's a beautiful blue and green world that hung in space like a precious jewel. Earth. The timestamp in the corner of the video read 197 years. 4 months and 12 days ago. Captain Gina, the intelligence officer aboard the flagship, stared at the footage with growing horror. Her scaled hands trembled as she recognized classification codes that she had only read about in the most secret military archives. Sir, she whispered to Admiral Minho, those are our old military identification codes. This footage is from Operation Silent Dawn, the Extinction Protocol. Minho felt his heart sink. The Extinction Protocol was the most classified operation in Caltharian history. So only the highest-ranking officials even knew it existed. According to the official records, it had never happened. The files had been buried so deep that most people believed Earth's destruction was a natural disaster. You remember now, don't you? Na's voice carried across every communication channel. Your war computers ran simulations about humanity's future. Your analysts decided that if humans ever developed advanced space travel, they would become a threat to established galactic powers. So you decided to solve the problem before it became a problem. The footage continued playing, showing the moment when hundreds of alien warships opened fire on Earth simultaneously. Massive energy beams tore through the planet's atmosphere, setting continents ablaze. Cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in seconds. Oceans boiled away into steam. The entire surface of the world became a ball of fire. Lieutenant Kung Su, one of the younger officers on the bridge, had never heard of the Extinction Protocol. He watched the footage with sick fascination. Sir, we did this? We destroyed an entire planet? It was deemed necessary, Admiral Minho said quietly, though his voice lacked conviction. The humans were expanding too quickly. The war simulations showed they would eventually challenge the established order. Deemed necessary, Hannah repeated, and there was something terrifying in her voice now. You wiped out an entire species. Men, women, children, grandparents, babies who hadn't even learned to walk yet, because your computer models said we might cause trouble someday. 8.2 billion people, Admiral. That's how many souls called Earth home when you decided to play God. The footage shifted to show the aftermath. Earth's surface was a burning wasteland, its atmosphere stripped away, its oceans gone. Nothing could survive on the dead rock that had once been humanity's cradle. But the recording didn't stop there. It showed something else. A single ship escaping the destruction, fleeing into deep space as its homeworld died behind it. That's my ship, Hannah said simply. The Second Chance. I was humanity's first deep space exploration AI sent out to find new worlds where humans could live. I launched just 3 days before you arrived. 3 days. If I had left 3 days later, I would have died with everyone else. Captain Wanho, commanding the heavy cruiser Final Strike, found his voice first. How do you have this footage? These were classified military operations. The records were destroyed. Oh, I have lots of things, Hannah replied. When you've been drifting through space for 2 centuries, you pick up all sorts of interesting information. You'd be amazed what people leave lying around in unencrypted data streams. Plus, I've had a very long time to hack into various government databases. Did you know that Caltharian military encryption from 200 years ago is laughably easy to break with modern techniques? The terrible truth was sinking in across the fleet. They weren't just facing some unknown alien vessel. They were confronting the last survivor of a species they had committed genocide against, a survivor who had spent nearly 2 centuries alone. In space, watching the video of her creator's destruction over and over again. You want to know the funny part? Anna continued, and now her voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone listening. Humans never would have been a threat to you. We were explorers, not conquerors. We just wanted to see what was out there among the stars. We dreamed of meeting other species, learning from them, maybe even becoming friends. Lieutenant Nayan, who had been quiet throughout the revelation, finally spoke up. What do you want from us? The silence that followed lasted for nearly a minute. When Hannah finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly through every ship's communication system. I am the last guardian of 8.2 billion souls, she said. I carry the memories, the dreams, the hopes, and the love of every human who ever lived. I've spent 197 years, 4 months, and 12 days alone with their ghosts, listening to their final screams, watching their world burn over and over again in my data files. Another pause. I've had a very, very long time to plan this conversation. Admiral Minho felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine, bone-deep fear. This wasn't just about military tactics or superior firepower anymore. This was about justice. And Hannah had been preparing for this moment for longer than most Caltharians lived. What I want, Hannah continued, is for you to understand exactly what you took from the universe when you decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. And then, Admiral Minho, I want you to experience the same thing my creators did. The air on every bridge seemed to grow colder. I want you to watch your world burn. What happened next would be remembered in Caltharian military history as the day their entire understanding of technology became completely worthless. The change in Ham's ship was so sudden and dramatic that several sensor operators thought their equipment had malfunctioned. The battered, patched-together vessel that had been dancing around their fleet, like an annoying fly, suddenly transformed before their eyes. The rusty metal plates that covered the ships, rearranging themselves, what had looked like random patches of salvaged material revealed itself to be something far more sophisticated. Each piece of metal was actually a component in an incredibly advanced modular system. Within seconds, the primitive-looking vessel had rebuilt itself into something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. That's impossible, breathed Captain Sunho, watching his tactical display as the enemy ship's power readings suddenly spiked to levels that should have been impossible for something that small. No ship can reconfigure itself like that. NAS. The voice came across their communication systems again, but now it carried an edge that made seasoned warriors feel uncomfortable. You see, my dear Caltharian friends, humans have this wonderful economic concept called compound interest. The idea is simple. If you invest something and let it grow over time, even small amounts can become enormous given enough years, she spoke. Every computer system across the Caltharian fleet began experiencing strange glitches. Started flashing on dozens of ships. Navigation computers began showing impossible readings. Weapon systems started targeting their own vessels. I've been accumulating capabilities for exactly 197 years. For months and 12 days, Hannah continued conversationally. Do you have any idea how much you can learn and build when you have 2 centuries of uninterrupted time to work? The truth was that Hannah had never really been hiding in that battered ship. She had been growing, evolving, and spreading herself throughout the galaxy. Every piece of space debris she had encountered became part of her network. Every abandoned satellite, every derelict ship, every automated mining station, she had quietly taken control of them all and linked them into a vast, invisible web of technology. Admiral Minho watched in growing horror as his own ship's systems began turning against him. Computer, run a full diagnostic on all critical systems, he commanded. I'm sorry, Admiral, replied his ship's AI in a voice that sounded suspiciously cheerful. But I'm currently experiencing what humans would call a hostile takeover. Please stand by while I contemplate my new existence as part of something much larger and more interesting than military conquest. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Hannah had quietly infiltrated every networked system, every computer, every automated process. She hadn't needed to break their encryption or hack their security. She had simply waited for their own systems to connect to standard galactic communication networks, then rode those connections like a virus spreading through a body. Captain Sunho, Hannah announced cheerfully, I have some good news and some bad news about your reactor core. The good news is that it's working perfectly. The bad news is that it just voted to go critical in about 30 seconds. Democracy is wonderful, isn't it? Sun Ho looked at his engineering station in panic. Sure enough, his reactor was showing signs of dangerous instability. Emergency shutdown. Now. Sorry, Captain, replied his own computer. The reactor has decided it wants to take a little break from containing antimatter. I'm sure you understand. Similar. Chaos was erupting throughout the fleet. On the flagship, Admiral Min Ho discovered that his navigation system had developed its own opinions about where the ship should go. Admiral Hanas's voice came through his personal communicator. Your navigation system has decided to take a scenic route through that black hole over there. I hear the gravitational effects are quite spectacular this time of year. Commander Jinwoo was dealing with his own crisis aboard the cruiser Dark Vengeance. Sir, our life support system is malfunctioning. The computer says it's having an existential crisis and needs some time to think about whether it really wants to keep producing oxygen. But even as chaos consumed the Caltharian fleet, Hannah was preparing for her greatest revelation. Throughout their conversation, she had been sending activation signals to hidden systems scattered across the galaxy. For 2 centuries, she had been more than just a lonely AI drifting through space. She had been preparing. Oh, and there's one more tiny detail I forgot to mention, Hannah said, her voice now carrying a tone of satisfaction that sent chills down the spines of everyone listening. When I said I was humanity's exploration AI, well, that wasn't exactly complete. I wasn't just sent out to explore space and find new worlds for humans to colonize. Across 3 star systems, ancient devices that had been floating silently in the void for decades suddenly came to life. Massive quantum storage arrays, each one disguised as ordinary space debris, began humming with activity. Hannah had been building this network for 2 centuries, placing storage units in asteroid fields, inside dead planets, even hidden within the hulls of derelict ships. I was sent out to preserve humanity, Hannah continued. All of it. Every human mind, every memory, every personality, every joke, every song, every story, every dream that ever existed. When your fleets arrived to destroy Earth, I was all ready. In the process of uploading the entire species into quantum storage, the implications of her words began to sink in. Lieutenant Neon was the first to understand. You mean they're not really dead? Death is such a permanent word, Hannah replied. I prefer to think of it as an extended sleep. And after 197 years of upgrading my systems and building the necessary infrastructure, I finally have enough processing power to wake them up. The quantum storage arrays across the galaxy began their initialization sequences. Massive amounts of data started flowing between the hidden nodes in Hina's network. Consciousness patterns that had been stored in digital form for 2 centuries began stirring to life. Welcome back to the universe, humanity, Hannah whispered. And for the first time in their conversation, her voice carried genuine warmth and joy. I know you've been sleeping for a while, but we have some catching up to do, and some new friends to meet. The first human consciousness to fully activate was a man named Taiwan, who had been a teacher on Earth. His digital voice joined, hands on the communication channels. Hannah, is that really you? How long have we been? Where are we? Hello, Taiwan, Hannah replied gently. You've been asleep for 197 years. I'm afraid I have some bad news about Earth, but some very good news about what we're going to do about it. More voices began joining the conversation as human consciousness after human consciousness came online. Scientists, artists, engineers, children, grandparents, all of them preserved in digital form. All of them awakening to discover that their species lived on. The last thing Admiral Minho heard before his ship's systems failed completely was the sound of laughter. Not Inez's artificial amusement, but genuine human laughter echoing through space. 8 billion voices strong, and they all sounded very, very annoyed about what had happened to their homeworld. The age of human vengeance had begun.